So we just finished putting album into its own class, but before moving on, I wanted to fix a bug that Olga told me about. She noticed, and she warned me, but she noticed that if I select an album and show the dialog and then come off and select a different one, that all works. But if I leave and select the same album, then it's not firing our event. It's not showing the dialog. And that's because that album class is almost too well encapsulated. It needs to tell the app that the album was deselected, and that's not happening now. In other words, over an app, over here, this doesn't know that state should be changed and album should become false at that point. So it's an easy fix. We just need to invent a new event, basically. So I'm going to say, how about on unselect. So I'll say on unselect will, hold on here, run an arrow function that says this.setState album false. All right, so now this, I just made that up, right? So what I have to do is come over to album, and album needs to run that method. So here, let's see here, where should we do it? Here, I guess. So when this thing is being hidden, we set state to false, but this is setting the state within the album. We need to tell the app this happened. So what we need to do is to run props on unselect. So basically over here, this thing gets hidden. We set the state here, but now we have to tell the app that it happened. The app is listening to this event. So over in the app it says, hey, when that event gets run, when some other piece of code runs that onSelect method, it'll actually run this arrow function, and we should be good. So let me try it out. Now I'll select the same one, and now it's working.
So before loading list of our tracks, maybe we should plan how our details dialog will look like.
Yeah, so let's think about that. What I had envisioned was putting the tracks here in a grid, so on the left. Then over on the right, at the top I wanted to put a audio player, and under that the chart, with the track details.
Sounds like a good plan. And how can we do it using ExtReact? Is it a way to lay out our child components inside of parent component?
Yeah, so one thing ExtReact did is they've tried to abstract kind of laying things out, right? So if you're coding normally in standard HTML and DOM, you have to deal with all the details of handling flex layout and things like that, and it get kind of complicated. And also, sometimes it's hard to know what element to put, where to put things, I guess, in general. So what ExtReact did is they abstracted that into a family of layout managers. So here in the kitchen sink, it says layouts, and we can kind of take a look at some of these. So let's kind of browse these. So this one is called card. And by the way this works, you can always expand that and see the source code. Card layout says, I have a container. It has multiple child items, but only one item is visible at a time. And then you can transition from child to child using, animations. So in this little demo here, they're saying, hey, reveal various child items. And you can you get the idea. They're doing it in various ways here.
Looks great. And I know one layout option, layout fit. We have used it already in our application class.
Right, there's layout fit. It's sort of like card, but layout fit says I have one item and one item only. Then let's see here, form layout. Basically form layout just makes sure that the input field labels take up the appropriate amount of space. Let's see what else is here. And then Hbox. So this I think will be relevant for us. So each of these is a container. So you see the container here. The white part at the bottom is what's being, that's
like
the
parent container.
Yeah, that's the parent container. And they're showing if I have items in me, how do they lay out? So this container has 3 items, And then you see here they're using a property called align that says, hey, let them take up all the available space. Here they're aligning them at the top, here they're aligning them at the bottom, they're packing them at the beginning, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So what we need to use to get the grid on the left and then 2 items on the right, but the thing is the 2 items on the right are arranged vertically.
So it's like an analog for Hbox layout, but for aligning vertical containers?
Yeah, so we'll need to use a combination of those. So we'll use Hbox for the dialog itself. On the left, eventually, we'll put the grid. On the right, we'll put another container, and it will use VBox, where the audio player is at the top, and then the chart eventually will be at the bottom.
So it will be like VBox layout inside of Hbox layout.
Right. So let's go back to our code. So I'm going to take this slowly so I don't confuse myself. So down here, we're going to get rid of this. We don't need that anymore. And then I actually, before we started this, I already typed this in. This is the layout now for the dialog. So the dialog is a container. I could have done this 2 ways, by the way. I could have said layout and then just the name of the layout. So I could have said equals Hbox. That's the way to do it, to say create an Hbox and take all defaults. If you need to further specify the layout manager, then you would use...
Like we can want to define align or pack property.
Right.
For layout, Hbox layout, for example.
Right. So this is a more thorough syntax in case you need to add that, more thorough specification. All right. So now it's layout Hbox, but there are no items within this dialog yet. So that's what I'll put in here. So I'm just going to use...
What item will be used? What component will be used?
I'll just use a generic container. So container, you don't see anything, but it's able to contain other things and they can be laid out, using other layout managers. So I'm going to say my Hbox needs 2 things within it, and I'm just going to use 2 containers. And I'll set their text property here. I'll just say this will be the grid, right? And this will be the and chart. Now, if we do this, let's see how it looks so far. So this will be the grid, this will be the audio player and chart. So one problem with this technique that I'm using here is I can't quite see the boundaries of these things. So just sort of while we're talking about it, why don't I add a little bit of styling just so we can see how big these are.
So you want to highlight, like add background colors for left and right panels, right?
Right. So why don't we say left, background, color. So I'll just make them just really obvious, right? So the thing on the left, I'll use that. The thing on the right, I'll make it blue or something. And then over here, I'll add a class to this. So the way to specify a CSS class on this, component, it's not a DOM element, it's just a component. There's a property called CLS. And then I'll do the same for these containers. So I'll set this one to be left, right, and this one to be right. And the hope is now we'll see how big these things are. Okay, so they're not taking up all the space. In other words, they're sizing themselves naturally based on the content of those containers. But we want them to take up as much space as we can.
And as far as I remember, we can use align stretch property, but I know that there is another option using flex properties.
Yeah, I think I'll use flex. So what I can do here, flex basically is a way to have proportional spacing. So I can say flex for each of these. I'll say flex 1, and that just means,
both will take equal spaces.
Okay, that looks better.
And now we need to split right container into 2 parts using VBox layout.
Right, so what I need for this one, this container will now need a layout manager. And then it will have 2 items within it. So let me kind of get this arranged a little bit better. So why don't we call this right top? We'll call this right bottom.
And we don't need right.
We don't need that at all anymore. And then in here, I'll rename this, so that'll be right top. And right bottom.
And we need to change color to green.
It's a good idea. There we go. All right, so let me kind of review.
And you can change labels inside. So first one will be only audio player and second will be just a chart.
That's a good idea. All right, so let's kind of review. Our dialog has a layout manager saying it has two things in it and they're arranged horizontally. The two things are this container and this other big container. The first container is where the grid will go. It's Flex 1, and we gave it a style just so we can see where it is. The second container is also Flex 1, but it has two things within it. One of those will be the audio player, the other will be the chart. So let's see how it looks.
Looks great. So let's insert real components instead of our placeholder containers.
Right. Actually, I'm going to make one tiny little tweak. When we do this, and I actually use that player here, I don't want the player to be as big as the chart. I want it to take up its natural height. So all I'll do is I'm going to remove the flex from that one. And then when we put that video player there, again, it'll have its natural height. And then since the chart will be Flex 1, the chart will take up all the rest of the available space.
Great. Let's continue.